Okay, we are here for the streaming moments, memories, usually. Alright, we are here for the streaming moments, memories. Pretty new to streaming, usually do video essays and the like, so we're just going to hang tight for a moment and see if we get some people to join us in here. I haven't interacted with my viewers yet, so I figured now would be as good of a time as ever to engage with some of my audience that's grown a little bit over just the past month or 2 months that I've been actively engaging in content creation. So we'll see. I'm hoping for at least a few people, but if not, that's okay. I know it's all part of the game, the process, and I trust the process. So I'll hang cool, wait for a couple people, maybe one or two to join, and then we will get right into it. All right. Just waiting on some people. All right, I guess I'll get started, and when people do trickle in, we'll engage as we go along.
You know, we won New Hampshire 3 times now, 3.
I always love the way he emphasizes counts or numbers. Like he says, we won New Hampshire 3 times 3, so you don't forget.
We win it every time. We win the primary, we win the generals, we've won it, and it's a very, very special place to me. It's very important. If you remember in 2016, we came here and we needed that win, and we won by 21 points, and it was great. And
I like how both he and Biden are continuously referencing all the way back to Biden at his recent UAW speech. The person that was introducing him was quoting tenure from Freudian slip, Biden's vice presidency, and Trump still goes back to 2016 all the time because that was his heyday in his rise to prominence in U.S. politics.
today, I have to tell you, it was very interesting because I said, wow, what a great victory. But then somebody ran up to the stage all dressed up nicely when it was at 7, but now I just walked up and it's at 14. But she ran up when it was 7, and, you know, we have to do what's good for our party. And she was up, and I said, wow, she's doing like a speech.
I mean, I feel like, honestly, I believe that Nikki Haley is going to stay in the race. I don't think she's going to drop out, not anytime soon at least. She has donors and she has orders. She is a neoconservative. She would be a war hawk, much like George W. Bush, and not too dissimilarly to Barack Obama. She is very pro-status quo, pro-establishment, and not much at all would change under her presidency. We would still have had the same aid packages to Ukraine. We would have still... the main difference with someone like Nikki Haley would be in the geopolitical issue of Israel-Palestine. I am 100% certain that Nikki Haley would have almost unilaterally sided with Israel and would have provided a lot of cover and excuses for their conduct that followed October 7th. So, with that being known, I don't think she would be a good president. She would be another neocon. And I personally have zero desires to return to the era of the Bush administration. That was not a fun time for anybody with the subprime mortgage crisis, 2 offensive wars on the national credit card, one of which was illegal, and we didn't get anything out of it. It was based on a complete and utter lie of Saddam having WMDs in Iraq. And it took a while for the Bush administration to even sell Colin Powell, who was a part of the administration. It took them tooth and nail effort to get him to sign on board with that. But he did, and here we are. We're in the aftermath of that still to this day. People think the aftermath of COVID was bad. The aftermath of the Iraq spending, the subprime mortgage crisis, and the economy hitting the Great Recession, everybody's still feeling that to some degree. A lot of Americans lost their homes during that because of the red tape that was cut during Bush's tenure, which allowed more predatory loans and refinancing of homes being pushed by these real estate companies, to where people were desperate. They were fed propaganda like, your house is a bank. If you refinance, it increases its value. And then they didn't read the fine print, which included that the interest rate would go up. And, well, a lot of them ended up not being able to pay for their home, and they were forcibly evicted. In Michael Moore's documentary, Capitalism, A Love Story, they actually show firsthand account of some people clearing out their belongings from their longtime home that they owned. They weren't even renting. They owned the property but chose to refinance. And ultimately, as a result, they lost their home and were evicted by the sheriff's department and didn't have a penny to their name, but they were paid by the bank that took their home to clean out the home, clean it up, and make it ready for the next inhabitant. If that doesn't strike you as dystopian, I don't know what possibly could. And that wasn't under Donald Trump. That wasn't under Joe Biden. That wasn't under Barack Obama. That was under George W. Bush. But for some strange reason, he gets a free pass in modern America because his war crimes and financial bungling and just disastrous presidency is so far removed from the political lexicon that a lot of people today that are old enough to vote weren't even... Well, they were alive, but they were very, very young during Bush's tenure. So... I know George Bush isn't on the ballot, but a lot of his ideology still is. A lot of Republicans run as neoconservatives. They are war hawks, they are Zionists, and ultimately they have no interest in world peace, stability, and a good quality of life for all sentient creatures. A lot of them tend to want the opposite. Big profits for a lot of oil industries, which is how we got into Iraq in the first place. And yeah, I would wager that a majority of the GOP and American populace as a whole have no interest in returning to neoconservatism. The rah-rah America era is long gone. That was an immediate reaction to September 11th, and it lasted for about a decade after, a little under a decade, because 2008 put a real damper on the fervor a lot of the neoconservatives were trying to push forward, and ultimately here we are in a state where not even a lot of Republican voters are interested in hearing what a neocon has to say anymore. They were looking in 2016 for an outside candidate because everybody was ultimately tired of the establishment and the status quo. The status quo works great for insider politicians and establishment figures like Nikki Haley, also Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, and in some cases Donald Trump. Because, I mean, almost every politician, including lawmakers, that go to D.C., after a while, they become entrenched in the corruption, greed, and just social climbing that is baked into the world of U.S. politics. And none of them are really immune to that, because I thought it was really bizarre. I know Bernie Sanders was everybody on the left's big hope for 2016 because he was promising things like Medicare for all, free college, an end to all the wars, which the end to all the wars did win a lot of people over on the right even. I don't think they were going to support they weren't going to but they weren't going to suddenly convert to being a social democrat, but they did like his vibe on his anti-Iraq war sentiment, the same way Donald Trump came out criticizing the Iraq war when he was running against and debating Jeb Bush, the brother of George W. Bush. But at the time, Donald Trump wasn't a vehement opponent of the Iraq War. In fact, he spoke favorably of it on several occasions back in 2003 through 2005. Meanwhile, Bernie Sanders was more consistent on that record, but he just didn't. I mean, obviously, there was a lot of foul play in the primaries. An election being as complicated as having super delegates and having to count the super delegates versus this, what a bunch of crap. The person who gets the most votes should win the election. And I know that opens up a separate conversation / debate about the Electoral College. We can cover that another time. But typically, in true form, it's supposed to be one man, one vote. That's supposed to be how the country decides who its leaders are going to be, whether that be the president of the United States or your local congressman, your lawmaker, or your 2 senators. So, with that out of the way, let's move on to more of Trump's reaction to his victory in New Hampshire.
It's like she won. She didn't win. She lost. And, you know,
I love how he always points out who, like, if they're not doing well in the polls, etc. He's like the first person to point that out and to make it readily apparent to the audience, like, they're losing, they're no good, they're bums, believe me, I am the winner, we're going to win bigly, huge.
Last week we had a little bit of a problem, and if you remember, Ron was very upset because she ran up and she pretended she won Iowa. And I looked around, I said, didn't she come in third? Yeah, she came in third. And then I looked at...
I mean, in some states where you don't have to declare party allegiance, it's not far-fetched to say that there are probably a lot of Democrats voting for her in the Republican primary because they want to keep her in the race as long as possible to be a thorn in Trump's side and get him off his game and kind of whittle him down before it comes time for him to do his rematch with Joe Biden at the end of this year. I mean, in my personal opinion, I think Biden's going to have a hard time this November, seeing as he doesn't have the media fear-mongering about COVID or blaming Trump for the aftermath of COVID, even though more people did die in 2021 versus 2020. It's a virus. It's not political. It doesn't care who you voted for. It doesn't care what party you registered for. It doesn't care how old Joe Biden is. It doesn't care how offensive Donald Trump's tweets are. It's a virus. Its only goal is to get into as many warm human vessels as possible so it can reproduce at a rapid rate and spread around the globe. That is the ultimate hardwired goal of a microbe, a virus. It is not to throw an election. So the fact that a pandemic was treated as a political football by both sides of the aisle ultimately speaks poorly of the U.S. citizenry. And I'm not talking about the vaccine mandates. I'm talking about everything from the national level, with the government knowing ahead of time just how bad it was going to be in January of 2020, 2 months before most of us caught on to what the heck was going on. And that's at the top level. Then we go to the local, on the ground level. Social media was full of all kinds of venom and tripe. And the venom referring to people attacking each other, that was one of the most divisive elections in U.S. history. The subsequent events of January will prove that to you. And social media was just dumpster fire in Chernobyl at that point. It was nothing but people attacking each other, virtue signaling. I'm a good person, so I wear a mask. Wearing the mask prevents water droplets from spreading, which were how the virus originally was thought to have transmitted from person to person. So wearing it, you shouldn't have worn it to feel like a good person. You should have worn it just because you didn't want to get your neighbors or family members sick. That is not an unreasonable stance to have taken, but, I mean, we all saw the posts. Those people that were cutting holes in the masks so they could eat while wearing it. That was just a virtue signal. That was people like that don't get enough praise at work or at home and going around saying, look at me, I'm a good person. I care about other people. Congratulations. Like, that doesn't make you unique and special. Okay.
At the polls, she was talking about most winnability, who's going to win, and I had one put up. I don't know if you see it, but I have one put up. We've won almost every single poll in the last 3 months against crooked Joe Biden. Almost every poll. And she doesn't win those polls. This is not your typical victory speech, but let's not have somebody...
If 2016 taught us anything, it's that you shouldn't rely too heavily on polling to determine how well you're going to do in a general election. I know this is a primary, so obviously polling is everything in this realm, but I just hope he doesn't take this into 2024. Well, November. We are in 2024. I hope he doesn't take this mindset going forward of, I'm doing so well in the polls, therefore I don't have to try. His opponent in 2016 did that, and that did not work out too well for her.
Take a victory when she had a very bad night. She had a very bad night. And you have the now very unpopular governor of this state. This guy, he's got to be on something. I've never seen anybody with energy. He's like hopscotch.
Hopscotch.
And, I'm watching this guy, and 2 weeks ago he said, we're going to win in the landslide. We're going to win. About 3 days ago he started saying, well, we want to do well. That's a big difference.
Yeah, there is a big difference between we're going to win and I want to do well. One is an assertion of confidence that you are going to win the election. The other is, like hopeful, man.
I walked out just now, we're 14 points up, and I don't know what it's going to be, but when she was up here, it was like 6 or 7, and, with like 7% of the vote counted. Now, let me just tell you, we had an unbelievable week last week in Iowa. We set a record. It was the best in the history of the caucus, in the history. And I remember I sort of had the same feeling. I'm up and I'm watching, and I said, she's taking a victory lap. And we beat her so badly. But Ron beat her also. Ron came in second and he left. She came in third and she's still hanging around. The other thing, she only got 25% of the Republican votes. I don't know if you saw that. Tremendous numbers of independents came out because in this state, because you have a governor that doesn't frankly know what the hell he's doing, in this state, in the Republican primary, they accept Democrats to vote. In fact, I think they had 4,000 Democrats before October 6th. They already voted. Now,
yeah, I know the system is set up the way it is. It's just my personal opinion that when it comes to primary elections, I do believe that the voting base should be restricted to members of that party. Otherwise, you end up with foul play, like people showing up in droves from the opposite party to vote in the candidate to act as a wedge. And, well, I mean, it's just more political games. It's not detrimental to, the Republic, but I believe that the party nomination should be chosen via votes from members of that party. That's not a really difficult concept to wrap one's head around. That would be like imagine if all of MAGA, just back in the day, didn't want didn't want Hillary Clinton. Well, nobody wanted Hillary Clinton, technically. I mean, they voted for her out of desperation because they really hated Trump. But nobody actually people. I mean, okay, maybe old boomers on the Democrat Party wanted Hillary Clinton, but most young people in general did not, and most voters, they voted for her out of desperation. That's the end goal of it. Same thing with Biden in 2020. Really, a lot of people didn't like Joe Biden. In fact, during the Democrat primaries, his own vice president was trying to characterize him as a racist by bringing up his opposition of busing back in the 1970s. Even though busing was not popular among lawmakers, even in the Democrat side, until it was a few years into its execution. So he was being judged for his views from the 1970s by his now current VP, which, by the way, I think is a total joke and a clown show. 1 minute, she's calling him a racist and a terrible person, asking for him to apologize, showing pictures of her as a kid saying, I went through busing, you didn't want me to go to school, like that type of thing. And then all of a sudden, he picks her for VP, all that shit just goes away. Yeah, go figure, right? Funny. Strange. What a coincidence. Nah, it's all just establishment games at this point. And I think people are just really craving an outsider.
Now, they're only voting because they want to make me look as bad as possible. Because if you remember, we won in 2016.
Well, actually, in that case, they'd be voting for Nikki Haley to act as a wedge against him, to keep pounding on him throughout the campaign trail so that he's substantially weaker when he faces Joe Biden. But after we saw last election cycle, when they did the main debates of 2020, Biden did not put on a very good performance. He ultimately, I honestly think he won based on the media and other people fear-mongering about Trump and blaming him for the entirety of COVID, and also... well, you had people that just didn't like Trump. he was very unpopular in his first term among Democrats, and he started to lose a lot of popularity with independents during 2020. It wasn't just COVID. Several things made his popularity take a dip, including the photo op with the upside-down Bible after the police dispersed protesters with tear gas. Don't even get me started on the summer of 2020. I could do a whole 10-hour segment on it, but I don't have time, and I don't really want to do that today. But yeah, there's a lot to be said of what went wrong there. And, 14,000 arrests throughout that summer for curfew violation, vandalism, assault, etc. And then you had the whole Rittenhouse thing. All of these things really did work to Joe Biden's favor in that election, especially Kyle Rittenhouse when he used him as the campaign ad where he had just said white nationalist militias and then shows the picture of Rittenhouse. Purposefully misleading, and, well, now that Rittenhouse has been acquitted, I would say if he did that again, that would be slander. Because, same as the people that call him a murderer. We can get into Rittenhouse another day.
If you really remember, and if you want to play it straight, we also won in 2020.
You know, in the back of my mind, I honestly thought he was gonna maybe pull that card, that we really won the 2020 election. No, you didn't. A lot of things were handled very poorly by the GOP during the 2020 election. They did not win the 2020 election. Mike Lindell is an idiot. He does not have a degree in political science. He is not a political commentator or analyzer. He has virtually no. He came up with this mumbo jumbo of numbers and said it's evidence that the Dominion voting machines were hacked, etc. And it amounted to nothing. In fact, he put out a $3 million challenge for whoever could refute his evidence. Somebody, I think it was a programmer or a mathematician of some sort, successfully refuted it. Mike Lindell refused to pay, and that guy took him to court, and the court ordered that he pay the money that he promised. So, like, if there is going to be any hope for the Republican Party in 2024, the election denial thing has to stop. It's not attractive when Stacey Abrams and Hillary Clinton did it, and it's not attractive when you do it, Donald. Stop. Focus on Biden's record. It's terrible. It's freaking terrible. You have this handed on a silver platter. Focus on his record. Nikki Haley will be focusing on Biden's record. She'll hammer him as much as possible when she's not going after people in her own party, but it is a primary.
By more. And we did much better in 2020 than we did in 2016.
Well, by raw vote count, he's right. Let's look at total votes in 2016. All right. Okay. 2016 presidential election. Let's see if Donald is telling the truth. He says that he did better in 2020 than he did in 2016. Let's take a look. November 8th, 2016. A day that we all remember. What were you doing that day? I went to vote. And then I woke up very surprised at the results of that election. I was not expecting that, and I had already lived through multiple different presidencies and presidential elections. It takes a lot to surprise me these days, but I hadn't been surprised at a victory like that since the Supreme Court ruled the victory for George Bush in 2000. So that was a pretty big shock. Let's look at the numbers. Okay, the usual right here. You could tell the entire Bible Belt always goes to the Republican. New York and up here the Northeast goes to the Dems. Same with California. Nevada can potentially flip.